And then there's the apostasy issue. And apostasy, of course, is one of those things that are so not open to debate according to Islamic law. In Islam, there's Sunni Islam, which is mainstream Islam. There's 4 schools of law. And according to all 4 schools of law, there's no debate whatsoever that the apostate, the Muslim who wishes to break away from Islam and either convert to another religion or just not even be a Muslim anymore, is to be executed. Now, of course, some are a little more lenient to the schools, and they prefer to torture you first in order to get you to come back to the light of Islam as opposed to executing you. And some won't execute women. They'll just keep them locked up for years. And in fact, I just read an account in Uganda where a Muslim man, the way it was portrayed was a Muslim man's daughter converted to Christianity. So he found out, got very angry, and he trapped her in a room for about 8 months without food or water until her little brother kept smuggling in water and food, and she was basically eating dirt. And when she was rescued, she weighed 44 pounds. Now, the way it was described, though, was, you know, look at this man, he misunderstood Islam and this. But in fact, he was so knowledgeable of what Islam teaches, because Islam, and specifically the school of law that is that's dominant in Uganda, teaches that apostates, women apostates, because they're not like men and they're ultra subjugated, as we heard before, the ultimate lowest class citizens. You don't kill them, but you actually trap them and you starve them and you force them into seeing the light of Islam. But the report didn't understand any of this. It was just, here's another, you know, misunderstander of Islam. And yet, to me, he understood Islam so well, not just the overall general fact that you kill, but he understood the differences, the details between, for a woman, you can actually starve her and torture her in that sense. So these are the things that helped shape the modern Middle East, and that helped shape what and helped create it from being a dominant Christian region. Let's say all of North Africa was Christian, Egypt and Syria and these regions, to becoming Muslim. Now, it's amazing to me to show you the level of disconnect for a lot of modern-day Muslims, because I was watching a sheikh speaking in Arabic, and he said all of that I'm saying. He said jizya, we'll get into jizya. Jizya is the tax that non-Muslims have to pay and to live in submission. And he said jihad is an obligation, and that is, in fact, how Islam spread. It spread with a sword. And he gave all these reasons. He said what I'm saying, basically. But then he came, and when someone said, well, what about, do you have to convert or force conversion? He said, well, no. My ancestors, he was Syrian, not us Syrian. He was a Syrian, and he said, my ancestors all embraced, obviously, Islam freely. So he doesn't understand. After telling us that Islam comes with a sword and telling us that Islam forces people to live as second-class citizens, he doesn't get it that maybe those people who all converted to Islam didn't do it because Islam was, as he said, a great religion. Maybe they did it for these practical reasons. So all sorts of disconnects exist, including among Muslims who just don't seem to be able to connect the dots of what's going on. And by the way, this issue of forced conversion and apostasy, I bring it up more because these two things have a symbiotic relationship, in that they are, on the one hand, people historically at least were forced, and still until now, and like I said, they'll tell you it's not part of Islamic law, but that doesn't matter because it's part of Islamic culture, and there's a difference. There's what the law says, and there's what that law and that mentality creates in the culture, overall, the overwhelming majority of the culture, who may not even know the law, but it becomes imbued and permeates the mentality of people who live there. So you may not be, and this word is actually, I think, an important word. It was coined a few decades ago. It's called Islamicate. And I think it's a very important word because Islamicate discusses how you don't have to be a jihadist. You don't have to read the Quran and know it by heart. You don't have to read the Hadith or know the Sharia. But because you're from that culture, 1,400 years of these teachings have just become embedded in the mentality and the worldview of people. And so, and arguably, even non-Muslims have come to share some of these traits and these mentalities, these cultures. And so that's even why it makes it worse. When we say that, you know, there's only a few radicals who are ultra-extreme jihadists who are out to do this, let's say, whatever, I don't know, arbitrary number, 20%. Okay, but the other 80% come from that mentality, whether it's consciously understood or not. It's a mentality that tells them the other, the non-Muslim, is beneath me. And so this kind of becomes part of the society. A Muslim can even be non-religious, not read the Quran, not have anything to do with it, But still, that's part of the worldview, and it becomes part of the worldview of the non-Muslim, as you know from the word dhimmitud, the mentality, I'll get into that word, the mentality of being suppressed as a non-Muslim, as a Christian or a Jew or anyone else, for so many centuries that it creates this collective identity that I am a second-class citizen and I should be very thankful for this. So all of these are the forces that are in the background that have helped bring us to where we are today, that very people know about and very people trace to it. And I've spoken a little bit about history. I'd like to now discuss a little bit of doctrine, which I think will help make sense of this. All of these things that I said, when you see a mob burning a church, or when you see apostates being killed, or Christians being jailed and tortured because of blasphemy laws, or Christian girls being raped and abducted and forced into conversion, all of these are traced back also to some extent to certain doctrines and worldviews. For instance, Quran 9:29, it says, fight the people of the book, who are, of course, the Jews and the Christians. And then it says, or the people who do not practice the true religion in this context, of course, is always Islam, the people who do not want to do this and that, until, when do you fight them? You fight them until they pay jizya, which means tribute, they pay money, and, this is the important part, and feel themselves utterly subdued. So when people talk about jizya, it's important to understand that it's not simply money. Jizya is an institution that, along with the money, comes a form of social contract, which means you're a second-class citizen. So this right here is a Quranic verse, and it's very clear-cut what it's saying. And mind you, look what it says. It says, fight these people until. Until means it's a perpetual affair. Until does not mean, it's not like, and I discuss this often, for example, when people say, well, look at the violence in the Old Testament, and, you know, the Crusades and this and that. And I always like to point out that in the Old Testament, there was violence and bloodshed, and God commanded it, but it's really recorded as history. It's descriptive. In the Quran, what's being written, again, the violence and all that, is prescriptive. And what that means is it's ongoing. And you catch it with these little subtle words, like until, or wherever. Quran 9:5 says, fight and slay the pagans wherever you find them. Again, open-ended. You can still find a lot of pagans around here, right here. Wherever, here we are. And when it says fight them until they pay jizya, we're not paying jizya. That means the fight is still on in one way or another. So this is one of the doctrines that has helped to lead to this sort of mentality. And again, we go back to this issue. You'll have the Islamists and the jihadists who know this, who understand this, and who seek to implement it. Then you'll have the average Muslim who doesn't know it, but because of that collective consciousness of 1,400 years, he still sees the non-Muslim as somehow beneath them, because he can't maybe articulate it and he can't even explain it, but it's just part of the culture.